Right. VP Education candidates. Question 1. At each exam period, there are over 35,000 different examined assessments at the University of Surrey. What do you believe is the most appropriate way to measure a student's understanding of their subject? I shall just ask that again once the noise has died down over there. Thank you. Succinctly put. At each exam period, there are over 35,000 different examined assessments at the university. What do you believe is the most appropriate way to measure a student's understanding of their subject? Imogen is going to answer first.
I think that it depends on the department and the course. Some courses are more subjective than others, and students may feel that exams aren't the most appropriate way to judge their competency. Unfortunately, however much I may dislike exams, I think they're an important aspect of student assessments. And the problem is that different people excel in different ways, and it means that departments have to find a balance between the variation of assessments in order to give all students the fairest opportunities to do their best. I think it's a difficult question to answer, and each course needs to specifically tailor their assessments.
Thanks very much. Sam, that's Sam Bed.
Well, I think exams are a very good, quick and effective way of highlighting student ability. However, I believe that the most effective way of grading students is to have a combination of coursework and exams. But again, it does depend on the subject you're looking into. We look at exams as a very pressurised situation. For some students, they don't deal well with this. And to gain a good grade at the end of the module, I feel that they should have the chance to be able to take part in coursework where they can research and prepare their answers well enough to go into the exam with a good grade behind them already to boost their confidence.
Thanks very much. I must ask the room, please, to keep the noise down. It's unsettling enough to be sat up here for the first time, lights in your face, without a constant murmur as well. So if you're not interested in what the candidates have to say, please, Roots is open. Sam Ratzer.
Yeah, with the variety of courses available here at Surrey, I don't believe there is one prescribed way for students to be assessed. I believe the power should still remain within the departments to decide what is the most appropriate way. However, primarily it's the quality of the assessment that is the main focus. Not just the quality of the timetabling, but the quality of the feedback and feed forwarding that you get from a piece of assessment. The quality of the timetabling, if you get to an exam period and you have 2 exams in 2 days which are worth 100% of your module, that's not going to be an effective way of ensuring that you're getting the best opportunity to show your full potential. So I think what we need is a more intelligent timetabling system that where departments get the opportunity to feed in where the percentage that these exams are worth. Also looking at the quality of the feedback. If you're going to get assessments loaded up and you're not getting decent feedback from there, it might not be worth even doing that assessment at all. So we need to ensure that there's consistent and timely feedback which will make these assessments worthwhile. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Moving on to question 2. Thank you. Please feel free to show your appreciation. After the launch of Surrey Learn is the new incarnation of ULearn that you all know and love. After the launch of Surrey Learn, we will have the leading virtual learning environment in the UK. Where will this leave the future of the physical learning environment? Once again, after the launch of Surrey Learn, we will have the leading virtual learning environment in the UK. Where will this leave the future of the physical learning environment? First to answer that is going to be Sam B.
I think there's no doubt that Surrey Learn will be an invaluable resource, but again, you have to find the right balance. It's going to be important that lecturers and tutors use the resource well to ensure that students have access to their lecture slides, for example. But handouts alone don't guarantee results, and it's all well and good saying, let's have it all online. But for a lecturer to then go on and explain and get a discussion out of the students in person is invaluable. At the end of the day, we're paying a fee to learn and to be taught. And I feel that if we all went just online, would we be getting the guidance that we need? Also, we need to think about the practical subjects. For example, if civil engineers may not be able to do surveying, for example, if you're only using online methods.
Would you drive over a motorway bridge built by somebody who's been taught online?
Precisely.
Sam Ratzer.
I'm going to be pretty blunt. The technology, the infrastructure for technological and interactive learning here at Surrey is horrendous. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done other than bringing in just Surrey Learn to ensure that actually Surrey is a university fit for the 21st century. There are plenty of other universities in our competitor group, such as Southampton, where the actual technology and available online resources is so much better. So Surrey Learn is a huge step forward, but it isn't the end. I think I've been speaking at Redsley recently with some of the advisors, Sarah Brooks from KPMG, and we've had really positive conversations about ensuring that the university is not thinking just a year down the line, but it's thinking about how Surrey's going to develop with technological learning moving into the future. Because with Surrey Learn, the replacement for ULearn, if people don't know already, it was coming in September. Still, most academics aren't going to be using it, so I don't think we're going to have, as of September, just an amazing system that everyone's using. We've got to have a plan, we're going to make sure it works, and hopefully when 100% of lecturers are using it, that's when we can be truly worrying about the future of physical learning. There will always be a place for physical lectures, just because that's what inspires people. It's actually having the human presence in it. But Surrey's moving forward, but I think we need to have a plan, and I'm keen to work on that, and that's one of my main fan and manifesto points this year.
Thanks. Imogen.
I think that a more advanced and developed online learning platform will ultimately aid contact hours, because having a place where all the required documents and information that students need to perform in class is something that has been lacking, and hopefully will be rectified by the new online platform. And the current problem with ULearn is that the academics themselves have little faith in the system, and that apathy filters down to the students, so they just don't feel like using it. And I think by introducing a user-friendly virtual learning environment, it will support the material covered in contact hours, and it will also deliver a platform for forums and discussions so that students can effectively feedback to the academics the problems that they're having on their course, or the things that they enjoy, so that they can reach a balance between students and academics. So I think it would be a good thing for contact hours.
Great, thanks very much. That's the pre-prepared questions out the way. We're going to freestyle now. Okay, the university has an aim to be a top 10 UK university, top 100 world university within 10 years. And this started a number of years ago. I think it's now within about 6.5 years. And there is progress towards that. Can the candidates please tell me a university that you think that Surrey should aspire to match or better? So what is the university that Surrey should most aspire to match or emulate? Imogen.
I haven't actually had much experience at any other university apart from the place I attended before here, which was Westminster, which was a shocking university. I actually think that universities should be aspiring to be like us, so I don't really have anything to say on that point.
No, that's a very patriotic point. Sam Ratzer.
I've had, during my time as a sabbatical officer, a lot of opportunities to interact with other universities, sabbatical officers, members of key academic staff at other universities. The one where I believe they've made a great progress in the last couple of years is Bath. Not only is it their interaction with the student union that is great, it's their interaction and their faith in their students. They've developed a great sporting structure with amazing facilities, and I think primarily it is their relationship with the student union. They actually put faith and trust into their student union. They give resources to their student union. And I think for us to develop and be our most effective, I think Bath is a good place to be. Really.
Great. Sam?
Well, I think it's about striking the balance. Obviously, we'd love to be getting this top of the league tables like Oxford and Cambridge, but really, are we saying that we just want to come to uni to get the really best results, become number one, or are we looking at student satisfaction, which is ultimately what the union wants to deliver? Obviously, we can look at Bath Uni and Durham Uni; they're getting brilliant results, but we need to. It's about taking it one step at a time and making sure that we don't make the student life too hard bearing and not enough on the social side. I think it's very important that we take a mixture of both and continue to build at a steady pace rather than saying, right, I want to be number 1 or 2 within the next 3.5 years. How viable is that?
Thanks very much. Ladies and gentlemen over there, have you got any points you wish to make? Some points in the corner there. I leave it to your discretion.
Hello. Well, actually, some of you may have noticed just a week or two ago that 4 universities moved from the 1994 group, which Surrey is a member of, to the Russell group, which, to be fair, is widely accepted as the top league of universities in Britain. Not necessarily in certain subjects, but overall. Is there anything that you could identify in Surrey's educational style which has prevented us from being a 5th or one of the 4?
I think that's something we could discuss, Jack. Just to explain for the viewers at home, universities are separated into informal football leagues, if you like, with the Russell Group being the Premiership, the 94 Group being the Championship, and then you move into Division 1 and Conference. So, 4 universities were promoted by invitation from the 94 Group, the Championship, up into the Premiership. And Surrey was not one of them. Why was that, and what could Surrey do in order to make its way into the big time? There is evidence that the Russell Group have an inordinately large amount of influence over government policy. Generally what they say is listened to. So how do we get into the big hitters? Is that all clear for everybody? Yes. Sam B, start us off.
Obviously, the Russell Group is what we aspire to be. We want to be one of the best universities in the country. I think, in terms of our teaching, we are a good university at the moment, but we need to make sure that the facilities are there to aid us in ensuring that we can move forward. For example, are the lecture theatres suitable for us all to be able to hear the lecturers teaching effectively? We have a lot of problems with microphones in the AP block, for example. Without the facilities there, can we really move forward? Obviously, I'd love to say that we should aspire to be in the Russell Group, but until we are ready, I don't think we should be invited. And the way we can improve that is by ensuring that we look at the feedback students give at the end of every module. So the module feedback forms, what are the students asking for? And that is going to motivate them to work harder to get us further up the league tables.
Great, thanks. Imogen?
I think it's important to recognise the changes that have happened recently at the university. Last year we took a big jump up the league tables, and it's not something to be dismissed. Progress happens slowly because that's the nature of the academic world. But through my time at Surrey, I'm in my final year now, every year it's clear that there's been a difference, a change and an improvement, and it will just come with time, but it's not something that can be rushed. It will happen when it's ready.
Sam Ratzer, finish us off.
Yeah, there's always going to be clear indicators that suggest we're not quite ready yet. Well, there has been. Things like not having a medical school, not having that stature when we lost out a few years ago to that. We don't generate as much research income as, say, some of our key competitor universities. So those are going to be barriers that stop us always pushing forward in that respect. But that's only part of the game. We have made huge strides in the improvement of our learning experience. We've made dramatic rises, as Imogen alluded to, in the league tables, moving up as high as 21 in some, which is a few years ago would have been seemed impossible. I feel like there's still room for improvement as we strive towards this top 10. But the one thing that I think we need to be doing is ensuring that everyone's up to date with the change. A lot of the academic staff at the moment are left in limbo because they're not sure of what other changes around the corner. I feel like we need a few years to catch up and ensure that everyone's on the same playing field, ensure that changes aren't just happening for the sake of it, and that everyone feels like they're working towards the same goal. And I'm scared at the moment for the academics because actually they're not too sure where the university is heading at the moment, and I feel like with some positive influence over the next year that we can sort of really generate a sort of a strategy where we're sort of reel things in a bit. So.
Thank you. Apologies for those who didn't understand the footballing metaphor and are still confused. I can't think of another way to describe it. If you think of the Russell Group as Morecambe and Wise, the 94 groups, the two Ronnies, everybody else is a mix of Dick Emery and Eric Sykes. Hopefully that will clear things up. Have we got any more questions from the floor? There's some over here, some over there, some over everywhere. Let's talk a little bit about Surrey. We're talking about everybody else. Let's talk about Surrey. You are all Surrey students after all.
Right, first off, can the people at the back shut up or get out? Because it's really rude. Okay, so I wanted to ask, like, if you're elected as VP Welfare, what will your main aims be?
Education.
Oh, fuck, I mean education.
I'm terribly sorry, you're a little bit late to the party.
Yeah, basically, what are your main aims as VP Education?
Oh, the main aims of the VP Education. That could be a quite wide question. We have got manifestos for that. We'll ask the candidates to give us their absolute top priority, if that's okay. Their absolutely number one priority. Jake, you had a question as well. Jake, over there, sorry. The lady in the floral dress in the corner.
Okay, so obviously the union has a budget to balance, but do you think it should be trying to force students through the doors of Rubik's during exam times?
Oh, controversial. The union has got money to make, but should we be trying to force students through the doors of Rubik's during exam time? So, give us your number one priority for your year in office, and tell us what you think students should be doing during exam time. And first to tell us is going to be Sam Ratzer.
Okay. My main aim for this year is to open up education and what the VP Education does to you. I think I've worked quite tirelessly this year to ensure that I'm understanding the full extent of what the role entails. In doing so, I haven't always been out there and actively seeking as much input from the average student out there. So my main aim is to ensure that anything that I'm doing is shaped by you, not only using the academic reps, but using people to help shape academic education campaigns, raising visibility of what I'm doing on the campus all the time, and sort of ensuring that there's full strength of the student body behind a lot of what we're trying to achieve. In terms of forcing students through Rubik's, the door of Rubik's, I think we've always been clear that we'd rather you achieve more in your exams than having that one night out before the week before your priority. I think Alan in his email out, or the top tips of 2012, was suggesting as such, because I think there's one night can do the damage. Yeah. Sam,
it's only fair to ask, you are the current VP Education. If I had £1 for every potential sabbatical who told me that they were going to spend less time behind their desk and out meeting the people, I'd probably retire early. Yeah. How can the students here believe that if you weren't able to do it this year, you're going to be able to do it next year?
Yeah, I've actually looked at the way my timetable is structured and the way that I set up my weeks, and I've looked at where are the most effective places to do it. And so in my manifesto, increasing the awareness of the VP Education is spending at least one afternoon a week in the LRC with an interactive stand, trying to encourage people to come over and participate. There's something I promised I would do. One of the questions at last year's question time was, will you be behind the desk or out there, VP Education? I've just found the role really difficult to make that time, and I've struggled with that, but I'm really keen to make sure that I'm a presence out on campus, and the LRC will be the place to do that.
Thanks. Sam?
Well, I think the main aim is about transparency. We have a big cohort of academic reps, but how do the students know that the academic rep is working for them? I think we need to publish the results, not publish everything. It would be impossible to publish everything, but we need to make sure that we highlight the reps that are making the big difference to the students. Make sure that we are getting regular updates from our rep. What is our rep doing? How do we know they haven't just chosen to be elected for the rep to put it on their CV and then just sit back and have an easy ride for the year?
Okay, Sam, you're a rep, you're also a faculty rep. What have you done to make a difference?
Well, I'd say as chairperson of the Business School Academic Reps, we've really worked hard to make sure that every week we meet with our head of school to ensure that the results make a difference. And then I feed back to the reps every week what our head of school has said, and they then go out to the rest of their cohort and tell them. I encourage them every week to make sure that they stand in their lectures to make sure that their students know what is going on.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want me
very
to
much.
go on?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's forcing students through the door is a bit of a strong word. No one is forcing you to go to Rubik's. Obviously, it's nice to have some time away from the study, but we do have the library facility that's open 24 hours a week, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. So that is a great resource for students who don't want to go to Rubik's to then go and carry on their studies when perhaps the library area is a bit quieter.
Imogen?
My main aim as VP Education would be to publicise the fact that students have a valid voice by implementing the REP programme and increasing the level of activity that the reps do within their course. Because if I'm not able to be there myself to talk to the student body at every moment, the reps will be there to support publicising that students have a valid voice. And I know this because I've worked tirelessly with my department this year to rebuild the bridge of communication because there wasn't one, and I think it's clear to say that there has been a positive improvement. And in regards to Rubik's, I wouldn't say that the union forces students through the doors.
Have you met our events manager?
Personally, I'm quite a fan of Rubik's, and I do go during exam time, but I would never go if I had an exam the next day because it's up to me. So, yeah.
Right. Let's return to the question of exams, something we've been having discussed online here. Do you think that it's time for the exam timetable to move into evenings and weekends? Oh. The room has an opinion, but what do you think? Sam B. 1 second. Sam B.
I think exam timetabling is always one of those issues that gets students talking. We had discussions last year where students were asked what would they prefer. I think for students it's getting that balance where some students are having 2 exams in one day. Obviously we have to do, some exams will have to do that. I think it's about minimising that. Okay, so one evening exam is, you may in the short term think, well, that's going to jeopardise my night out, but we need to think in the long term, that's going to give you more time to prepare. You're not going to be rushed from having to go from one morning exam to an afternoon exam straight. And I think it's about getting the balance, asking the students again that what would they like from their exam timetable. But we have so many exams across so many subjects that we can't timetable them all to have 1 exam a day and not expect our students to perhaps have some in the evening.
Thank you. Sam Ratzer.
Yeah. With the move to the 15 credit module structure that was implemented this year, at the end of each semester we're having more and more exams than we've ever had. The pressure on the timetabling department and actually the amount of sessions that we have is going to continue rising, and the amount of space on campus for exam timetable space is ever diminishing. It's going to be hard to avoid having to use those slots, and but I think we've got to look at the principles which were set up with the student union and the university in partnership over the last couple of years, which have set out things like if you have an exam up until 6 o'clock in the evening or 8 o'clock in the evening, you can't have one up before 12. We've got to look at those and keep reviewing those in partnership with the timetabling department to ensure that students aren't being, exams are being, performance are being put at risk. I alluded earlier to a more intelligent timetabling system. I met with the timetabling team at the end of last week about looking at ways to move forward. They've said that actually that it's possible to have a more intelligent timetabling system that looks at the weighting of which exams have, and I think that's something to say that suggests that it's possible. It's just that it hasn't ever been thought of. This year was the first time also that it was automated, so I think it's a new system that's been put to the test. And actually I've heard, and speaking to academic reps, speaking to other people in different departments, they've actually been really positive about some of the changes, and actually some people's exam tables, they've noticed a big difference between this one and last year's one. So we've got stuff to work on, but I think we've got positive progress to be made over the next year.
Thank you very much. Imogen.
I think it's something that needs to be implemented after the students have been asked themselves, because obviously cutting in to weekends and evenings during exam times is going to cause some controversy, and I know there was some controversy this year with the new exam times, especially on my course. I do understand though that with more exams they have to find the time, because they can't give students more than 2 exams in a day, and to be honest, students shouldn't have 2 exams in a day, because I know from my own experience that it's incredibly stressful, and then you tend to underperform because you're not being given the room to do your best. So I think a middle ground needs to be found, which would be quite difficult, but the most important thing is getting the feedback from the students before anything is done.
Thanks. Right, let's move on to some fees questions here. I hear quite a lot ahead at the break, the phrase that students will be expecting more when they pay more. Students will be expecting more when they be paying £9,000. Where's the evidence for this? Where is the evidence that students will be expecting 3 times as much? Imogen.
From working on UCAS days for potential students, that's where I have gained the impression that incoming students expect more, because obviously £9,000 is a huge sum of money, especially when you're coming from sixth form. If that had been the case for me, it would have been a very difficult decision on whether to come to university. And obviously, if a course is costing more, that means that per lecture it costs more, and the university and specifically the individual departments need to look at how they can reorganise their courses in order to show students that they're getting as much for their money as possible.
Thanks. Sam.
I think it's about quality over quantity. When you're saying you're expecting more, you may have more hours of teaching, but is the quality of the teaching any better? I think we need to use our module evaluation feedback forms and say the quality is lacking here. The new students are coming in and paying £9,000 a year. How can we improve the quality of lectures for them? Also, we need to look at our graduate employment. Graduate employment at Surrey is very high. We're one of the leading universities in that area. We have a professional training programme. There we will be going out and we'll be earning money, and we can put that to one side and start to think...
Oh, not if you have an unpaid placement.
If you have an unpaid placement, obviously, again, you've got the quality issue. You're going out, you're getting experience, which will then, when you go out as a graduate, allow you to hopefully gain a graduate job that will pay more.
Okay, Sam Ratzer.
I personally haven't carried out any research into the increased expectation, but if there's anything that's going to make the university work harder to improve the quality of what they're actually offering, maybe 9,000, maybe the fees. But if anything's going to make the university work harder, that's got to be a good thing for the quality of education on offer here at Surrey.
You think the university isn't working hard enough at the moment?
The university is working hard, but they've actually made, over the course of this year, I've seen actually, it's £9,000 has put the shits into the staff here, I think. So they're working harder.
Right. Let's take some comments from the floor, please. We've got some hands going up over there. There's some hands at the back. There's some hands down there. Nice and loud at the mic, Mr. Soundman, if you wouldn't mind.
Are we only allowed one question, or can I have two quick ones?
Yeah, if you start to ramble, we might lose interest and go off.
The first question is, you alluded to the fact that the timetables or whatever are being run through tests, so you did a test this year to make it automated. Now, if my exams are affected by your test, that affects my final degree classification. Now, you might turn around and say, that test didn't work last year, but I've still got the degree that's been affected by your tests. So you might decide that that test didn't work and change it next year, but I've still got to go the rest of my life with a degree classification that was affected by your timetable and issues. So what will be done about that? Second of all, a lot of the stuff that the students on my course and a lot of courses that are very essay-based gripe about is the glass ceiling, which happens to be around the 70% mark. A lot of students say that was an excellent essay, or the lecturers will say that was a brilliant essay, and we get 74, 75%. And then we turn around to the lecturers and say, well, how do we get that extra 25%? And they don't have an answer. So why isn't an excellent essay getting 90%, 95%? Why is it only that 74, 75, 76% mark?
Thanks. Anybody got any points they'd like to make? Oh, there's Mike's got a point over there.
It's sort of a mixture of a point and a question. As a civil engineer, a level 3 civil engineer, I've gone through finding out that my course actually requires a lot more payment from me than I originally knew about. We've had to fork out for personal protective equipment, we've had to buy drawing supplies. Do you think that perhaps these hidden course costs should be put on the advertisement and promotional materials for these courses that we're applying for?
Great, we've got hidden course costs. Keep them coming. I'm writing these down. Don't worry, we'll form these into questions when we've got a full panel back again. Feel free to make a point rather than just a question.
Hi, I have a question about exam retakes.
You have a question about what, sir?
Exam retakes and what the candidates think about it. So at Surrey, I believe you're allowed 2 retakes of your exams under the new guidelines. In rival institutions...
I have to stop you there, because I can't hear a word you're saying. I'm terribly sorry.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Sorry, exam retakes and what the candidates' views are. So in Surrey, you're allowed 2 retakes under the new system. In rival institutions such as Kingston, you're allowed up to 5. Do they think that's fair?
No, we have someone from Kingston here.
You're not allowed 2 retakes at Surrey. You're only allowed 1 second chance. But you're saying that Kingston are allowed 5?
Yeah, I've heard someone from Kingston University there.
I believe we've got somebody from Kingston who can clarify that.
Well, the new registrar, David, says that it's you're allowed up to 5. So.
Well, I can assure you that everybody only has 1 chance to retake at Surrey. The only time you have more than 1 chance is if the first one was retrospectively proved that you had extenuating circumstances. A rather boring technical point. Right, we've got a full panel of candidates back. Let's go for some questions. I'm going to pick up this chap's point about the glass ceiling. This is very important, and this is something that the university management themselves wishes to break, so to speak. There is a tendency for lecturers to put an artificial cap on marks for subjects that are, say, non-maths based, where you can't be yes or no, around about the 75-80% mark. You cannot be perfect. So how do you get 90% plus? What do you think about that? Let's deal with that first, and then we'll come back to the course costs, and then we'll come on to the regulations, if that's okay. Okay, Sam Ratzer, you are going to start us off. Tell us about the glass ceiling in exam marks.
Yeah. Mark does make a really good point about this academic tendency to hover around the 70% mark, and actually research has been done across all different departments about where the marks fall, and majority of departments have a bell curve where actually they fall around 70%, and they will be there's very few marks. Most of the marks are just either side of 70, so you either get 69 or you get 71. So a lot of this work's been done to try and rewrite grain boundaries to ensure that there are academics feel confident that they can mark work on the criteria up to 100%. So actually there is being work done at the moment to try and ensure that departments are looking at ways in which they can start rewarding people beyond the 70% mark. Because traditionally subjects like law have made it incredibly hard to reach anything more than 70, and actually the majority of people will hover around 69. And hopefully over the course of the next couple of years people will start to realise, sort of notice big differences. I did Spanish translation modules, and actually I was ever only marked down from 80, so that never gave me that opportunity to achieve the high marks, achieve the 100% that I really wish to do. Thing is, within an institution like this, there's a lot of cultural change that needs to happen, because there are a lot of reluctant academics within the community who don't like to see students achieve. So I feel like actually we've got the basis to start. There is work to develop on that. I would just say, yeah.
Great, thanks. The glass ceiling for exam marks, Sambi.
I think we do need to encourage a more consistent marking programme. You often hear students talking about, I like such a lecturer because they seem to mark less harshly than others. I think we need to make sure that the marking structures are always available to students. They're often there, but students don't realise that they can ask the lecturer and say, we have a marking structure, is it possible to gain an insight on how you're going to be marking the papers? Obviously for essays, a lot of it, compared to a maths-based exam where you do the working out and you get an answer and the answer is either correct or incorrect, essays are often to do with how you've related the theory and how your understanding is. We need to make sure that the lecturers are aware that they need to be able to not cap marks at 80%, and that we need to be pushing forward that if we're charging higher fees, students expect greater results, but they need to make sure that the teaching reflects that they can get the high results, and that we need to get out of the culture that lecturers will cap marks.
Thanks. Imogen.
I'd just like to apologise for running off.
No, that's quite all right. I feel like doing that myself several times a week.
Being an English student, capped marks is something that has haunted me since I began at university. I think that for the courses that are primarily subjective, it's very difficult for students to ever achieve the grades that they feel and know that they're capable of. And I think that what the departments need to do is have a look at why they've introduced this cap and think about removing it, because in my whole 3 years I've never reached an 80, and I don't feel that that's a fair reflection, and I know that a lot of students feel like that too. And also, if students in other courses which are science-based and maths-based are able to reach these 90s and close to 100%, then that's something that should roll throughout the university and not just be for specific courses.
Thank you. We had a point raised there about course costs. These are hidden course costs. When you arrive at university, you then take a module and you're told that, well, certainly in the case of civil engineers, you've got to have safety equipment, you might have drawing boards. If you're on an arts course, you may have to pay for equipment, pay for a field trip, something like that. These are costs that a compulsory part of your module that you didn't know you were going to have to pay. And this is something that Surrey students have told us are a big problem. Now, in America, in the United States, there is no such thing as hidden course costs. They're actually quite open about it. In the prospectus, everything is advertised, how much you will have to pay. And in fact, they're quite proud of the additional money that you have to pay sometimes. How would you tackle hidden course costs? A word of warning, the easy answer is to say you would publish it up front. However, you may be taking a large 12-bore shotgun and shooting yourself squarely in the foot if you are the only university to publish in advance how much your extra course costs are going to be. I tell you that in advance. Right, tell us what you're going to do about unhiding or keeping hidden course costs. Sam B.
I think hidden course costs is a contentious issue. As a management student, it's never something I've come across before. when you come to the university, and particularly when you're within a practical subject such as engineering, I think we need to start thinking that, yes, we are a university that likes to take those kind of subjects practically, so you go and you do your surveying. But again, we need to make sure that although we can't publish the costs and say, right, you're going to be spending this much on safety equipment, this much on other equipment, I think we need to say that there must be some sort of funding that we can give to subsidise particularly those who are finding it difficult with the finances. So
I feel that this £11 million surplus has been spent once again this evening. It's about the fourth time we've spent it.
I just think that we need to make sure that although we can't be completely open, I think you need to have something there that would almost suggest, you need to say that you're coming to a top-class university, you're going to be doing something practical, there may be other costs involved.
Okay, Sam is proposing a strong hint. Imogen, what would you do?
I think that perhaps on UCAS days, departments may suggest to students that there will be other costs other than the course fees. Again, to draw on my own course, I dread to think how much I have spent on books in the last 3 years, but I'm sure it's close to £1,000. Books are very, very expensive. I also think that perhaps the union themselves could put in their freshers' introductory guide that they might not want to blow the whole student loan in the first few weeks because they may have some costs for academic needs.
Sam Ratzer.
Saying that we can't publish the costs here at Surrey, I feel like it means to say that we need to be looking beyond the boundaries of Surrey and looking at working with other universities and other student unions across the country to try and make a real good campaign of this, to try and ensure that hidden course costs become available across the whole board. It is one of the NUS's priority campaigns at the moment, and we have already got the resources available to make a good work of a campaign here. I think one of the major hidden course costs is actually that of the placement, that people don't realise necessarily up front what the cost of a placement, especially unpaid placements, are. And I feel this is something that I'm passionate about because I'm seeing some of my friends who've gone out on placement this year footing bills of up to £5,000 to £6,000 to have that worthwhile experience, yet they didn't realise that they were going to have to pay that money up front. So we'll look at campaigns that we can work with over the course of this year with the NUS internally, alongside potentially the next VP welfare, because there's things that need to be done. It can't just be limited to education. There's probably things like the laundry. Like, I don't think anyone probably ever encountered the fact that would be paying £20 a time to go laundry, or is that just me? Maybe. But the placements, which is something integral, to what Surrey is, the placement year, we need to offer support to those people. And I look at somewhere like the Alumni Fund, which generates hundreds of £1,000s a year, as somewhere where we can be offering money in the form of small bursaries to placement students, people who are on either unpaid or low-paid placements. So I think there are ways in which we can be working towards highlighting this issue.
Okay, I'm going to move on to academic regulations in a minute. That's something that you're all very keen to talk about. Let's just see what people are saying online. People are saying that it looks like somebody should give me a Corona again. I think that's a fair point. Hidden course costs such as books must be highlighted by course leaders and the union. Why are oral exams not exercised at Surrey? Oh, it's just gone off the screen. Something about oral exams. It was quite good when I read it first time round. Draw the line at 100%. That's what things are marked out of. If you're only going to mark to 80%, then mark it out of 80%. And I'm a final year politics student. I only get 5 hours a week contact. Are contact hours too low? 5 hours. Okay, you can do the maths. It's quite a lot per hour there. That's a good wage. Right, have we got any points from the floor? It doesn't have to be a question. Somebody wants to say something. There we are. We've got somebody there.
All of the candidates have talked or touched over academic reps. I was wondering what you think about the consistency within the different faculties across all the departments in terms of, I'd say, in my department or personally in my year, my academic rep is really good, very approachable, whereas when I was in first year, I would say my academic rep wasn't so approachable, didn't really give us feedback. How would you ensure as VP Education that there is consistency across each year, all faculties, each department, etc.?
Okay, we'll come to that. Have we got any more points?
Going back to course costs, about the book issue, like now terms have been split up into two, like the 15 credits. People have to spend up to like £400 on books per term. Like the books are costing nearly £50 per book. Some students can't afford that, and there's only about 2 copies in the library, so everyone takes them out so quickly. And if you can't afford the books, then you're not getting the information. So what are they going to do about that?
Yeah. This is a point that comes up time and time again. For some courses, well, for a lot of courses, there are core texts that are very, very important. And for one reason or another, maybe the reading lists haven't been updated to the library, or reading lists have changed, or there's been expansion in the amount of students. Those core texts are not available in the library. The official line is that if it is an important book, then you really should consider buying it. But even buying a big textbook second-hand could be £20, £30. And if you've got 10 or more core texts, then you're looking at 2, 3, as you suggested, £400. The perennial problem of core texts and availability. And let's also ask the candidates about consistency in academic reps. Sometimes you can have a great academic rep, sometimes you can have an academic rep that requires a bit of extra. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I don't know what I was saying. Probably wasn't very interesting. Oh yes, academic reps. How are we going to have better consistency of academic reps throughout the university? While Sam Ratzer composes us himself, we'll get Imogen.
This year, as president of a departmental society, one of my main aims was to include the academic reps within the society, to make sure that they had the best opportunity to hear all the voices from the students, and this also gave the students the ability to have a greater access to the reps. So if I was to be made education, I would want to work alongside the VP societies in order to implement some sort of system which integrated departmental societies and reps in order to increase the voice. And if there wasn't a departmental society, I would want to work personally with the reps to make sure that I could give them the tools which they could then utilise to be the best that they could be.
Okay, what about the issue of core texts?
It's unacceptable for the library not to have the core text. There's something that I wasn't aware of. For English, the library are very good, and every text that we have to read is in the library in some way or another, and often they have countless copies. It's just unacceptable. It shouldn't be the case, and especially if a single book is costing £50, then the fact that the university aren't supplying it is something that I just wouldn't stand for as VP Education.
Sam Ratzer, you look suitably composed.
This is the first question on the academics.
Consistency of the quality of academic reps, bearing in mind it is a voluntary position, and the availability of core texts.
The student unions worked tirelessly over the last 2 years to really improve the profile and improve the structure of the academic rep system. 2 years ago, the student union was conscious of 90 academic reps and offered support and training to that. In the space of 2 years, we have almost 400 academic reps, which I think shows a significant amount of time, that shows the effort that's been put into developing that. At the moment, academic reps don't receive necessarily all the support they need from the departments. And the amount of support they receive from their own departments is inconsistent across the whole of the university. So that's why I think sometimes we often see this inconsistency, because they don't always get the opportunity to meet with their departments and actually raise the issues and make them effective. By bringing in the faculty reps this year, we've tried to ensure that the VP Education receives more information about how the rep system can be developed. We've introduced forum sessions and feedback forms to ensure that the reps can feedback and ensure that their voices are heard, and with suggestions for improvement of the system. Introducing an opportunity for students to have an input and review the performance of their academic rep, I think would be a great way to ensure that academic reps are kept on their toes and actually they're doing a job. Because if the students don't feel like their academic rep is doing something, I feel there should be a mechanism in place for them to either remove or actually make sure that either the student union or their department is aware that they're not doing the job that they need to. It's a few simple ways of ensuring that we can get the most out of our academic rep system.
Thanks. Sam B.
So, do you want me to do the reps question?
Yeah,
first?
you can answer in any order you feel
So,
comfortable.
I'll go on to the academic reps first. As both faculty rep for FBEL and the chairperson of the business school reps, I think that this year we saw the introduction of the refresher training for reps, which I think was a great incentive to motivate the reps to further enhance how they are helping their students. I think also at the beginning of the year you are asked to elect reps by, I think it's week 4. Obviously it's a lot of hype at the beginning of the year, getting to your lectures, getting the core text, making sure you know what's going on. The reps are kind of lost in that wave of information. I'm in a talk tomorrow with Paul Coward, who works within the Student Support Office within the business school, to see if we can move the rep elections for level 1 reps going into level 2 and level 2 reps going into level 3 to get the reps elected before the summer, so therefore they are motivated to and are working out how they're going to best represent the students. We also have the business cards that are given out at the beginning of the year, and countless numbers of business cards go unused in the union office, and I feel that we should make sure these are used effectively, and with the new BLE have somewhere where you can find out who your rep is and contact them through that resource. Going back to the books, obviously you often find that the core text is written in the module description and the handbook. I think it's important to make sure that if the lecturers are going to issue that you need a core text, that they actually make reading, that suggested reading from the core text. So you often find that, particularly in the business school, some of the lecturers say the recommended reading is from a separate book that is not in the core textbook. And also we have a great system of e-journals and the e-library, as well as short loan text, to make sure that students are getting the references they need.
Thanks very much.
It's all right to have a say on the book.
Sam, if you want to chip in?
I've worked hard with the academic liaison librarians who are... there's an academic liaison librarian for each of your faculties, each of your departments, and they're the people who are working on the floor of the library with departmental links. I've tried to bring them into the loop this year, offering them a chance to speak with the academic reps and ensure the academic reps are communicating with them. Some of the key things that they've come out and said is that if students reserve books, it ensures that the library knows that there's a demand for them. So currently, if there's a high demand for books, yet the library, no one's reserving them and ensuring that the library knows, then that's not the library's not knowing that they need to order more in. So that's a way of which students can inform the system, for a cheeky plug there. But hopefully, with more links between the VP Education and the academic liaison librarians over the next couple of years, we'll be able to see that the level of information that the library is receiving about what students need will increase, and hopefully the library will end up being better resourced in line with what students expect it to be. It's going to take a bit of hard work, but I don't think the next VP Education will be a non-hard working person.
Well, on that subject, I do have to ask, Sam, Imogen, you've both worked with Sam Ratzer this year as VP Education. You're standing against him. Tell us why you don't think he should have another year in the post. Sam will, of course, have an opportunity to tell us why he should, but Sam B, tell us why. No more Sam Ratzer.
I think it's about keeping the union fresh. Sam's obviously worked this year. I think you need to get a new influx of new ideas. Make sure that we are kept on our toes, make sure that we are working, or we don't want to get too comfortable. We need to make sure that we are speaking to the students enough to make sure that we know the problems they have and work for them. And I think that by bringing in a wave of fresh air, I think that it means that we can bring in new ideas that we perhaps have seen that Sam won't have.
Imogen?
This is not about Sam's inability as a VP Education, because that's not the case. It's about the fact that I'm incredibly passionate about rights for students, especially in the world of academia. Our voices are often squashed, and I feel that over my time at Surrey, I've gained the skills to be able to represent the student as best as possible in regards to their education.
Sam Ratzer, Sam Bed thinks that you're stale. Imogen thinks she's got a passion. Tell us why you should get a second chance.
I think the amount of time and effort I've put in this year has meant that it's, actually I don't think you should vote for me anymore.
And with that,
no, I've worked tirelessly. I've put as much emotional energy into this role as possible, and I think most people who work around me will say that I've given everything to the job. I think the role of VP Education is so broad and so wide-ranging that you're never going to be everything to everyone, and I'll just keep working tirelessly. But I feel like with another year in the role, I'll be able to help refine the role and make it more approachable and make sure that the role of VP Education is as effective as it can be. At the moment, I don't think the VP Education role, as it stands, has the opportunity to be the best representative of students as an elected representative. And I feel like another year with the understanding and everything I've put into it, the role will be better in a year's time for someone else to pick up from it.
There we are, you've got a clear choice. I feel I do have to explain something to reassure the viewers at home. It's kind of taken on the debate. In Mexico, there is generally a problem with flies going into your beer bottle. So what they tend to do is put a bit of lime in it. We're not in Mexico, we're in Guildford. Putting lime in a beer is a bit like adding cowbell to a record. So I'm happy without the lime. You can calm down. Thank you. That's the real issue dealt with. Okay, now, there are many different ways that people are educated. There's lots of different ways that you consume information. You all know the theory. You can be a visual communicator. You can be an oral communicator. Some people learn best through the medium of song. So this is now an opportunity for our candidates who are going to be standing for the position of VP Education to educate the room with a chorus and a verse or two of their favourite song. We haven't done this for a little while in question time. I will let a volunteer go first.
I'll go. It's quite embarrassing, and it's not fair on the song that I sing it because it's a rap, but this is my favourite song. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. How much would you like?
Until the crowd boo you off.
Okay, excellent. This is my moment. I was shooting some meatball outside of school when a couple of guys who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighbourhood. I got a one little fight. My mum got scared. She said, "You're moving with your auntie and uncle to Bel-Air." I whispered for a cab, and when they came near, the lights explosive fresh and the dice in the mirror. If anything, I thought this could go away, but I thought, nah, forget it. You're home to Bel-Air.
Right, Sam. No, please, after you, he says.
After you, Sam.
I decide then, it's going to be you next.
Calm down.
Calm down, dear.
I don't know, really.
You live in a world with no song. We're going to sit here all night until you pipe up, lad.
How about there's a Jungle Skank.
You've got lots of supporters. they can always try and pipe up and help you.
If you join in with me, I'll sing the Jungle Skank. Okay, right. After, ready, right. 3, 2, 1, go. Up, down, left, right, left. I'm the Jungle Man.
Yes. Feel free to give yourself a round of applause. Sam Ratzer.
I think I'm going to do a song that's been representative of my year. It's I'm Still Standing by Elton John. I'm still standing after all this time, picking up the pieces of my life without you on my mind. Singing, I'm still standing. Yeah, I can't even know. I'm still standing.
Thank you. Right.
Can't believe I just did.
You need one of these. You all know what happens now. I ask a question.
Is it going to be if we deserve a record deal?
If you deserve a record deal, right. Okay, our final question of the night for our education candidates. I'll ask the question and give you a countdown from 3, and you hold up your sign whether you agree or you disagree. 1 second. Shush now. Shush. Right. Okay. The university have just spent £11 million on a library extension. But should they have bothered at all? Should the university just give every student a Kindle?
So are we
an
saying...
electronic book reader.
Are you asking us
That's
to
the
say...
question. Should the university just give every student an electronic book reader and let's forget about libraries? No more problems with core texts, no more problems about books not available. Every student has a Kindle, every student has their course books on their device. After 3, 2, 1. There we are, your candidates for BP Education. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mike. The viewers at home, you can flick onto the red button. You don't have to. Mike's going to take over now and cover some pundits.
Okay, guys, my first question to you. On Twitter, it was a comment that came in. Is this all just a glorified popularity contest? Somebody's questioning whether people are just voting for their friends. What's the point in having elections? So,
I think what's disappointing so far tonight is the standard of the debate. I think it's disappointing that the candidates haven't staked out positions on some of the bigger, more strategic issues. We've got very bogged down, I think, with some of the questions on the tiny micro issues. And some of the questions, there hasn't really been a great deal of difference between the candidates, or the candidates maybe haven't had the confidence to express a strong view. I think that's disappointing. I think that's a more salient issue than whether it's a personal popularity contest or whatever. I think what's also disappointing is that the candidates maybe in some cases have failed to really drive some of their big points home. And I notice on Twitter that they've got their cheerleaders at various points in the debate to sort of emphasise the points for them. Well, if they were making the points effectively from the platform, they wouldn't have to do that. So they get a bonus point for using Twitter, but they lose a point for not making the point effectively from the platform in the first place.
Just to add to that, I think some of the candidates are going to have to hope it's a popularity contest, because I'm afraid to say that some of the quality of the debate tonight has been pretty poor. And if students were voting on the substance of the issues, in some of the categories they might struggle to pick one person. And that is a huge, huge disappointment as far as I'm concerned. But having said that, there are certain issues where we've got a kind of indication of what individual candidates think about particular issues. On hidden course costs, I was pretty disappointed with the arguments that were being furthered by members of the panel, but at least we got an idea of what they know and what they believe.
I don't think dropping a hint is a credible campaigning or policy position, quite frankly, on hidden course costs. I know they're going to do better than that.
Quite frankly, if the candidates either believe that the university should be transparent about hidden course costs, or they don't. It's to me one or the other.
I'm going to take a slightly more positive approach and say that it's not a popularity contest. There are two things in place for this. As we know, as Ollie pointed out earlier, we have 27 candidates this time. The more candidates in an election, the less chance it becomes of being a popularity contest. And second of all, the voting system that we use at this university, whereby you rank candidates, means that in the majority of occasions, nobody receives election upon the first round of votes. Basically, in our elections, candidates ask you to put them as number one. However, if you don't like that candidate, you can put your next best candidate as number two. And it was on the basis of those 2s and 3s and 4s that most elections at this university are in the end decided. So you may have your friend who's running, but you may also have a second person who isn't your friend, but you like their policy. So I think that to say it's purely a popularity contest would be wrong. Obviously popularity plays a part in it, but popularity doesn't come from nothing. Popularity comes from your involvement in the university at an earlier stage. And of course, if you're involved in the university for the time, you're going to have a natural advantage anyway.
With that though, do you feel that the candidates sort of are more relying on their popularity than actually campaign manifestos?
Possibly tonight you have candidates that are relying on their past records, on the fact that they're well known from being elected to office already. However, yesterday in both elections we had 7/8 candidates, 6 candidates who have never held position before in this university, and apart from one who's the current events and trading officer, and those candidates will find it difficult to poll over 20% in the first round, meaning they all know that to get elected they're going to have to reach further upfield and get people to vote for them who aren't naturally their friends and put as a 2. Now, there's one popular misconception I'd like to point out, is that if you put your best friend as 1 and then put nobody as 2, you're not doing your friend any service there. Okay? Because the only reason your friend's votes are going to get redistributed is once your friend has been eliminated from the election. So what you're saying in that sense is, I'll vote for my friend, but then past that I just don't want my vote to count at all, and it gets put in the bin. What you need to do after that is be constructive, look to see who you want to put as your number 2, because if your friend is unlucky enough to get kicked out of the election, then you want your vote to still count and go to the best possible place.
Just to interject there, I mean, an interesting question that I think we should all try and answer now is, can you actually name the one thing that the VP Education candidates are going to change, or what's the one centrepiece of each of their candidacies? Because I couldn't deduce anything from that at all.
Yeah, I'd like to counter what Jamie said, because I do think there's a tendency towards a popularity contest. It's really difficult to pick out where these candidates are saying that they're actually going to change union policy on something. They're supposed to be the policy leadership in their particular area, and they're not doing that. I think it's much better than yesterday the Society's candidates, which, as far as I was concerned, it was just a disaster. None of them sprang out for me, and I think the candidates here have differentiated themselves to some extent from each other. But there have been no big ideas. There have been no ideas like, is there enough room on campus to accommodate all the exams? No, let's move off campus. There's nobody saying the union line will be under me that the university is not categorically not doing enough to facilitate proper exam arrangements. And then you can go from there on ideas about how to fix it. But there's no strong speech like that. But they do need to be stronger.
It'd be difficult for a candidate to take a position on that, because less than 12 months ago we engaged the student body and asked them what they'd want in terms of whether they want exams at the weekend, the evenings, whether they'd like to go off campus, and that was put to the people, that was put in a poll online, and this, what we have at the moment, is what the students chose.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, there is still the point is, people are not just elected to follow the opinion of students who might have moved on 2 to 3 that was right. You know, who may well have graduated. There has to be some leadership from these individuals who we have invested our faith in to represent us on these particular issues, and we are getting no indication of what people actually think about it. To me, it's just, and you look at some of the manifestos, it seems very waffly, very vague. We're going to increase representation. You know, we're going to protect students. There is nothing to substantiate the claims that these individuals are making, and I want to see in the presidential debate some more substance, if that's possible.
And let's hope we don't get candidates asked to sing any more songs. I'm not sure really that helps the standard of the debate, you know. If you're talking about it being a popularity contest, I noticed that the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is going to win a lot of votes for that candidate there.
Steve, at the University of Creative Arts, is it UCA?
UCA, yeah.
With the glass ceiling that was brought up, do you find that comes into play there at all?
Well, you know, I was interested in that debate because this is a national issue, actually. Glass ceiling, using the full range of marks up to 100% is a national issue for academics. So I was interested in that debate. I mean, at UCA, I would say that, like most universities, there's a reluctance by many academics to go into very, very high mark ranges. But I think there has to be some understanding from students about that. If an academic, some academics would see themselves as going out on a limb if they mark a piece of work at 95%, 96%. All those marks are subject to scrutiny, you know, internally by other academics and externally by external examiners. And if an academic goes out with a piece of work and says that's 95 or 96%, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. So I think that has to be understood. If you mark something like that, you're saying that that work is close to perfect. And that's a very difficult position actually to justify in the academic debate. But having said that, you don't want to get into a situation where you're artificially marking everything out of 70 or you're marking everything out of 75. But in humanities subjects, there has to be a willingness for academics to maybe mark exceptional work into the 80s or maybe into, you know, the 90 sort of mark. But I don't think it's realistic for students to expect marks at 95 or 96. That's not going to happen in higher education.
I mean, there seems to be a fundamental conflict between the messages given by the candidates, and of all of them, I quite like Imogen's "Let Surrey be Surrey" kind of ideal, because you can't aim to be in the Russell Group and then aim to give 90s. I mean, you would be laughed out of the Russell Group for doing that. These are the institutions that want to protect academic standards, and they set the trends, and if you don't go with those trends, you're not going to get into the Russell Group. Moreover, you know, there was Sam Ratzer, again, when it comes to substance, alluded to the fact that there's a strong emphasis and division that needs to be fought between, are we chasing research or education at this university? That wasn't addressed by the other two candidates and would need to be addressed in the future, because the Russell Group is primarily a group of research-based universities. Education is secondary principle to that group.
What was disappointing about that element of the debate was that everybody was quite prepared to accept the idea that the Russell Group is some kind of Premier League. Nobody was actually prepared to maybe challenge that view of universities.
I agree. I play devil's advocate to some extent in asking the question, because there are universities, specifically as well in the 1994 group, who are very good in specific areas, and the 1994 group touts itself as being a group of small research-intensive universities. So I kind of like the idea that maybe other universities should aspire to be like us. I think perhaps it might be a kick in the teeth for some people that we weren't among the five.
Yeah. What did not come out in the discussion was the tension between teaching and research. Because if a university is going to go for research, then that must be at the expense of teaching. So if you have your lecturers and your academics spending all their time on research, it means they are spending less time with undergraduate students. So actually, if Surrey aspires to Russell Brook, it may have to invest more in research, and that could actually worsen the student experience for the students on the ground floor. So I think that has to be understood, and that should really have come out more clearly in the debate.
From my perspective, I do civil engineering, and it does seem that research actually benefits my course.
Yeah.
So, for instance, we have lecturers who are out there, they're researching the new technologies, they are at the cutting edge. So, for me, research at a university is definitely a positive thing. It brings money in, it allows us to do more in-depth laboratory experiments and things like that. So, I think it depends on the observation from the course.
You're right, Mike. If research works really well in a university, that's how it should work. Research should feed back into the teaching so that the students on the ground floor benefit from the cutting edge knowledge that's being developed in the department. Unfortunately, it sometimes does not work like that, and what the reality sometimes is that your lecturers are spending all the time in their offices churning out research papers in order to maintain the research rating so that they can maintain their league table position on their funding. So it doesn't always work in the students' favour, but you're right. I mean, best practice is it should work like that.
This should have come out of the debate. I mean, again, we're getting into the minutiae of what we believe, and that's good because it brings some vibrancy to the debate. But this should have been coming from the candidates who should have been doing their research around these sorts of issues because, again, in day-to-day meetings, they need to have a vision, they need to have an idea of what they believe, and we need to know what that is so we can legitimise what they go on to do.
I mean, a point that on that wasn't raised in the debate by the candidates was that in 2013 it's the next RAE by the government, which is the research assessment of all the universities. They take all the output that was made by all the lecturers, they count it up, they give you a rating, and your university then can apply for funding from government bodies based on your rating. But that's obviously a top priority for this university at the moment. Now, how we balance that with improving education, I don't know, and the candidates probably should have addressed that. Now, once that's finished, obviously they'll probably swing back the other way, where the university's going to be looking for teaching staff that can teach better than they can research. And it's a kind of a pendulum that goes back and forth over the years. How we get the equilibrium for students, though, is a very big question that wasn't answered tonight.
Changing the subject slightly, hidden course costs. This seems to be a hot topic amongst sort of students at the university. Jack, do you find that there's many hidden course costs that you've encountered?
No, I don't think they're particularly hidden. I think that sometimes when you come to university for the first time, you get an extremely nasty surprise when you get further up and you find out how much books cost. Engaging slightly with what was later said about getting books in the library, I don't think that the library helps out with that in some respects, sometimes because they're not able to. So students do have this burden. And sometimes you're talking about books that are out of print, or they're going to be sent around to about 500 people in the whole world, and they cost £120 each. Even second hand, they cost £80 each, and you can't get them in the library. So from that side of things, I've seen that problem.
Mike, where was the reference in all of that to e-books and e-libraries and?
I think it was joked about.
Well, maybe it was joked about at the end in terms of the Kindle with that particular question, but actually. The candidates seem to dismiss the balance that the party, particularly politics, for instance. They made a decision that they were going to invest in e-books, essentially, versus hard resources in the library. What do the candidates believe about that? There was no reference to e-books, so I take from it they're completely unconcerned about where the balance of investment is, and therefore they have no view. They're not going to go out and argue in favour of e-books, which I personally think is something we should be striving towards at this university as we move into the future.
I have to say that I feel quite smug after that point in the debate, because University of Creative Arts has got quite a good library actually, and quite a good library service, and we always try and make sure that key texts are in the library for students, that you've got 5 or 6 copies of key text, and we're also embarking on a digitisation strategy at the moment where we're trying to digitise key passages of books for students. I think it is an issue if you've got heavily academic courses or engineering courses indeed, where you might be buying very expensive key texts at 50, 60, 70 quid a time. That's a big financial burden for students. But another point that I thought was interesting was University of Creative Arts, where I work, is fundamentally an art school. And traditionally we always levied materials charges for students to cover the cost of all the sort of artistic materials or sculptural materials or something they might have to use. But actually now, in the era of higher fees, we don't any longer levy any materials charges. So actually any student at UCA would face no or very minimal hidden costs, as you put it. So I'm quite surprised to hear the extent of that problem at Surrey.
I would say there's another side to it though, from the other angle, is how many costs can you make? I mean, Sam joked about it, but for example, the £20 a month to use the laundry service. How many costs do you have to tell the students they have?
Cost quarterly. We're talking about
I
very
know what
specific
I know what we're talking about,
course
but I mean, there's also an element where a student has to do the research to know what is going to entail.
There's a very clear distinction between the two. And you know what we're talking about. We're talking about civil engineers that have to provide protective garments to do whatever they have to do. We're talking about politics and English literature students that have to provide books. We're not talking about people who have
I think when you go to university, you know you're...
Yeah, of course, but some indication would be very, very, very nice indeed in terms of how much I might actually have to fork out.
Moving back towards the candidates, I really want to emphasise that I think Sam Ratzer stole the show on that one.
On what?
On the hidden course costs. He had obviously done his homework on it. He knew that the NUS had it as a priority campaign this year. And so he talks about going to other student unions. He talks about unpaid placements, which is also something that's been brought up on the national agenda. And I think, like the others, he was a bit light on concrete solutions, but he hadn't ignored the problem, and he knew a lot about it beforehand. I don't think it's enough just to say, for example, like Imogen did, that the union should highlight the course costs in the initial literature. There needs to be a complete cultural change. Whether or not that's going more down the American route, having the universities do it does need to be done on a national level.
On the basis of Sam Ratzer, I did like the humility of his performance tonight. I mean, he really made it clear that he knew that his first term wasn't 100% successful in his own terms, and that he'll strive for elected again to make a difference for a second time and to improve on his performance. I think that it was clear from his display that he'd learned a lot over the past year, and that he still had a lot to give the union.
And actually, in terms of my notes, he was the only one that articulated substantial policy, which he said he was going to work towards setting up a system in which the money that's raised through the alumni fund can be operationalised for placement students to use as, to essentially have a bursary system for placement students.
I would agree.
Was the only policy that came out tonight.
I would agree with that, but I think probably the candidate for me who's shown out so far is Dan Stevens. In the first debate, I thought he was a very solid performer who showed a good grasp of detail on the issues, and actually did seem to have some substantial policies, was able to put them across pretty well from the platform.
I mean, also in education, the good point was, Imogen and Sam both brought new perspectives to education that I think would miss if we got Sam Ratzer definitely re-elected, because it's easy to fall into that 2-year SAB culture that's developed at Surrey, whereby we continue to re-elect the same people on the basis simply because they know what they're doing. We shouldn't be scared to elect someone new, and I think they both made good points about why we should elect them when they talked about why we shouldn't vote for Sam.
So you're saying you shouldn't re-elect somebody because they've done a good job, but because they've done a bloody brilliant job.
No. What I'm saying, Jack, is that we should naturally assume that because we're familiar with a candidate, they're going to offer the best that this is the students.
Yeah, okay.
From a perspective of the overall sort of election process, do you think that we at Surrey are almost stringent enough in following up the SABs on their manifestos, keeping them sort of to what they said they were going to do?
That's the job of the media.
Well,
that's your job, Mark.
Let me take this on, because as union chair, one of the roles is to ensure that people have levels of accountability. There are levels of accountability. One of the things that we have instituted over the last couple of years here is the review panel of sabbatical officers, which assesses them on the basis of the three objectives and aims that they come up with at the start of the year. And actually that process this year has been successful in that we had motions of censure placed against individual candidates for poor performance in certain areas, and people place on action plans in order to improve their performance. So there has been that level of accountability, but more does need to be done. Otherwise, we just get a situation which we've had in the past couple of years, and I can think of one particular person, who I shan't name, who basically used the sabbatical position to get a reference on his or her CV in order to get a job.
I mean his CV, because they're all great.
Well, I'm talking a couple of years ago.
I mean, it's an extremely difficult thing to do, because what you have to remember about a university election is that this manifesto won't apply to 1/3 of the students that are here next year, because they would have never have seen it. So the consistent turnover of electorate means that the person that's coming to the office isn't necessarily bound to the new people, because they don't know what they stood on. They don't know the manifesto they stood on. So maybe there needs to be some process where we make aware to the students the promises that the sabbaticals in their first year had made to them in the previous years, and that may help encourage students to understand what that person said they would give to them, even though they weren't involved in the process in the first place.
Can I make a quick point just in response to that? Because what's quite interesting, I think, at the moment across all universities, and it's the National Student Survey that's providing the motive force here, but the quality cycle is becoming very, very short now. You know, we're talking about an electorate that obviously changes every year. A third of your electorate changes every year in student union election terms. But what's also interesting is you're filling in a national student survey, maybe in January, February, March, or something like that. That gives the university very little time, actually, to respond to student pressures or student demands. You know, the academic year begins in September, and really you've got to build up a head of steam on change and try and get that change effected by maybe January, February. So you really only have a window of maybe 3 or 4 months in which to effect change, which will actually be obvious, which would then feed through into NSS results. So the quality cycle that we're working with in universities now is very, very short. We're really demanding quick results now if universities want to get tangible improvements in NSS results.
That was something that wasn't mentioned much in this debate as well, which I think has been a significant issue in the past, is the fact of the NSS, the National Student Survey. How the questions are formed, how the responses are dealt with by the university and the union. It would have been nice to have heard how the candidates thought, or their confidence in the process and how it can be developed, or how the university can develop its own schemes in order to gauge feedback. I mean, I know Sam B touched on MEQs and their importance, but there needs to be more where the university and the students' union go and ask students what they want from teaching and what they believe greater or better teaching means.
I think we also need a wider debate, just briefly, a wider debate on what the NSS is about. Because I noticed that Surrey is promoting it to students with opposed to saying, "We love Surrey." Let's tell the world about how we love Surrey. So is it about promoting your university, or is it about trying to effect change or point out weaknesses that could be improved?
There's a huge question for validity.
So we've got the presidential campaign sort of election starting now. I can't ask you, Jack, unfortunately, but what would we like to see from the candidates?
A real debate. A real debate
got,
focusing on some big issues, hopefully.
Because we've got the people at home, I'd like you to just tell the people at home some questions to maybe put in. Give them some ideas to really sort of liven things up.
What is the one thing that these people are going to change? What's the one defining feature of their presidency going to be? That's it. That's all it should be.
Well, we've highlighted some big issues in our discussion here on National Student Survey, NSS, tuition fees. There's some big issues that they should be talking about tonight.
Absolutely. Just quickly.
I want to know what the union can do for the individual, and how this person's going to make sure that the union works to force the university to give the individual students of this university as much as they can for their money.
Cool. So, over to you, Alan.